Have you ever looked at a chart and it just feels messy, like a total chaotic jumble of ups and downs? Well, a single line on a time series plot is often hiding multiple stories all happening at once. Today, we're going to learn how to decompose that data, how to pull apart those different stories to find the real signal hiding inside all that noise. Let's jump in.
So take a look at something like this. Imagine it's the monthly sales for a souvenir shop. You see these huge peaks, these deep valleys, but also this general kind of upward drift over the years. It looks pretty wild. So when you're staring at data like this, you have to ask yourself, what is really going on here? What's the actual story?
To make any sense of that chaos, we really need a way to break it down. We need some kind of tool that lets us untangle all the different things happening at once and look at them one by one.
And that tool is called time series decomposition. It's a really powerful method that lets us take a time series and deconstruct it into its core parts. Think of it like taking apart a complicated engine and laying out all the pieces on the floor so you can finally see how the whole thing actually works.
So basically, almost every time series is like a song made up of three main instruments. First, you've got the trend. That's the long-term melody, the overall direction things are heading. Then you have the seasonal component. That's the repeating, predictable rhythm, like a drum beat. And finally, you have the irregular component. That's all the random static and background noise you can't really predict. Our job is to isolate each one of those sounds.
The best way to get a feel for this is to start with a simpler case, data that doesn't have that repeating seasonal beat. This way, we can just focus on separating that long-term melody, the trend, from all the random noise.
Okay, so let's look at a classic, kind of fascinating dataset. The age at which 42 English kings died, one after the other. If you just plot it out, it looks totally random, right? Just a bunch of dots all over the place. But the question is there a long-term story, a trend, hiding in there somewhere?
To find out, we use a technique called smoothing. A really common way to do this is with a moving average. So, if we average out every 3 kings' lifespans in a row, we start to filter out some of those really wild swings. You can start to see a shape is beginning to emerge, even if it's still a bit bumpy.
But here's the aha moment. Watch what happens when we crank that moving average up to 8 points. Boom! All of a sudden, a clear and really interesting trend pops out. The age of death for these kings actually went down for a while before starting a long, steady climb upwards. That's the hidden story that was completely buried in the noise.
All right, now that we've seen how to pull out a trend, let's bring back that seasonal rhythm and tackle a more complex case, one that has all three components working together. For this, we'll look at the number of births per month in New York City all the way from 1946 to 1959.
So when we run this data through our decomposition process, this is what we get. It spits out 4 distinct charts. We start with the observed data at the top. That's the original, complete time series. The process then separates it into the long-term trend, the repeating seasonal pattern, and whatever is left over, the random noise. Let's look at what each one tells us.
First up, the trend. Once you strip away all those seasonal ups and downs, you can see the underlying story really clearly. There's a little dip around 1948, but after that, it's pretty much a steady, long-term climb in the number of monthly births in New York City. That's the big picture movement.
Next, let's look at that seasonal component. And this is amazing. The pattern is incredibly consistent. It's like clockwork. Every single year, you see a big spike in births around July and a low point in February. This exact same rhythm was playing out year after year, on top of that long-term trend we just saw.
And finally, this is what's left, the irregular or random component. After we've accounted for that big upward trend and that predictable yearly cycle, this is just the noise that remains. These are the little unpredictable wobbles that don't fit into the other two patterns.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but why bother? Why go through all this trouble to break the data apart? Well, one of the most powerful reasons is something called seasonal adjustment.
See, on one side you have the original data, where those huge seasonal spikes make it really hard to see what's actually happening from month to month. But now look at the other side. By mathematically removing that predictable seasonal cycle, we get a much clearer view of the underlying trend. Now we can see the real growth without getting distracted by the fact that, yeah, we always expect a peak in the summer.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What are the key ideas you should add to your own data analysis toolkit from all this?
The biggest thing to remember is that what looks like one messy line is usually a mix of a long-term trend, a repeating seasonal pattern, and just random noise. Decomposition is how we separate those ingredients. For simple data, smoothing is a great way to find that hidden trend. And for more complex stuff, seasonally adjusting it, just taking out that predictable cycle, lets you see the true direction of your data. This isn't just some neat math trick, it's a fundamental first step to really understanding what your data is trying to tell you.
By breaking a time series down into these core parts, we get a much, much deeper understanding of what was happening in the past. And that, of course, leads to the ultimate question. Now that you can clearly see the trend and the seasonal patterns of yesterday, what will you predict for tomorrow?